right, before we begin, 5th graders, you need to have your math notebook. So you can either have this one or wherever you're keeping your math notes. You're going to take your notebook and you're going to open it to your table of contents. And we're working on Standard 5, NBT B7. That's dividing decimals, and this time we're going to use the Big 7 strategy. So my page is on page 6, so whatever page you are on for taking notes, that's where you're going to write it, and then you're going to go making sure that you write in the top right-hand corner that you're on your page, titling it Dividing by Decimals. We're using the Big 7 strategy. So this is really replacing our algorithm strategy. So if it ever asks you to divide using the standard algorithm, you're going to use this strategy. So for example, in our lesson 14 problem set, it says show each step using the standard algorithm. This is the Big 7 strategy. So it's the same thing. It's just the Big 7 requires us to really think about place value. And as you can see here, we have that place value. So we're going to be thinking about place value. Then you can go ahead and write your division problem. 1 and 448 thousandths divided by 4. Now, the way that we're going to set this up is we're going to use our multiplication facts. So we're using our multiplication facts, multiplying by 4 facts, because that's our divisor, okay? So whatever we're dividing by, that's the number that we need to have our facts for. And we just need to have our facts for multiplying times 1 through 9. Okay? Now, this is super easy to do because multiplication is just repeated addition, right? So like 4 times 1 is 4. And then so times 2, I add 4, I get 8. Times 3, I add 4, I get 12. 4 times 4, I add 4 to 12, I get 16. 4 times 5, I add 4 more to 16, I get 20. 4 times 6 would be 4 more, 24. 4 times 7 would be 28, so I just keep adding 4 each time. And then once I get to 4 times 9, that's all I really need to have, because 4 times 10, right, what I can do is for 4 times 10, this would be like 4 times 10 would be 40. So that's why I don't need to go beyond that for my place value. These are our single digit. How many digits fit inside of each place value? Just 1 digit, right? Okay, so our Big 7, how do we set it up, right? We have our dividend, which is our whole, divided by our divisor, right? We can also think, right, this is our whole divided by our part, okay? So inside of this is going to be our whole, and on the outside is going to be our part, and that's going to equal our unknown part up here. Okay, so we are trying to figure out this unknown part right there. So let's make the Big 7. So basically you'll see in a regular algorithm you would just use kind of like part of a box. Well, now we're going to draw a line down to make a Big 7, and that's why it's called the Big 7 strategy. So on the outside of my Big 7 strategy is this 4 here. And on the inside is my whole 1 and 48 hundredths. And I'm actually going to have you draw this again, but over here. And instead of just 4, we're going to make like a big rectangle. And we're going to draw those 4. So I've made it into 2. And partition this in half, partition this in half, partition this in half. 1, 2, 3, 4. So really what I'm doing is in my Big 7, I'm keeping track of how much I put into each group. So that's really, I'm going to show how we're putting everything into each group in this one right here and how that looks in our Big 7. So first of all, I just go each place value, 1. Okay, can I multiply 4 times the number and get something equal to or less than 1? No. So what goes in right above the 1 is a 0. And then I'm going to put up this decimal. So I'm moving on to the tenths. I have 10 tenths. Okay? So 10 tenths, right? So if I'm multiplying by 1/10, so if I multiply times 1/10, that would be 4 tenths. If I multiply times 2 tenths, that would be 8 tenths, right? 4 groups of 2 tenths would be 8 tenths. If I multiply times 3 tenths, that's 1 behind the decimal here, 1 behind the decimal over here, that would be 1 and 2 tenths. So here is where 1.0 or 10 tenths would go. So I'm going to use this fact, right? And so right here, this would be 4 times 2 tenths. I line up the decimal, would be 8 tenths. Now what goes here? Zeros. So now what is in each one of these groups? 2 tenths. I have 4 groups of 2 tenths, which is 8 tenths. So that's why I'm taking away, right, that 8 tenths. This is 0, this is 0. Okay, so 8 thousandths minus no thousandths is 8 thousandths. 4 thousandths or 4 hundredths minus no hundredths is 4 hundredths. And then I have 10 tenths. So 10 dimes would be like 1 whole, minus 8 dimes would be 2 dimes. Right? So again, I'm thinking this right here, 10 tenths, would be like 10 dimes is 1 whole. Subtract 8 dimes from that, and I would have 2 dimes less, or 2 tenths left. So this is how much I have left to partition into my 4 groups. So this is how much is in each group so far. So right here, that's why this 2 is right, which is in each group right now. So now I'm looking at this value, and I'm just looking at it in the hundredths place value, right? So I already did the tenths place value right here. So now I'm looking at it from the hundredths place value right there. So I'm just looking at the hundredths place value. I see 24. So again, I know that 4 times 6 is 24. So if I'm thinking about hundredths, I have 4 times 6 hundredths. That would be 1, 2 behind the decimal, 1, 2 behind the decimal there. If it was times 7 hundredths, right, that would be 1, 2 behind the decimal, 28 hundredths there. So that is too much. We don't have enough to put 7 hundredths in each one, but I could put 6 hundredths in each one. So I'm going to use this fact. So I know that 4 times 6 hundredths would be 24 hundredths. And then what goes here? 0. So what is going into each one of these groups is another 6 hundredths. So what I have in each group is 2 tenths plus 6 hundredths, which is 26 hundredths, right? 2 dimes and 6 pennies is 26 pennies. So what do I have left to distribute? So what I have left to distribute, I subtract. This would be 8 subtract 0 thousandths. 8, 0, 0 point. So I have 8 thousandths left. So same thing over here, right? I'm just keeping track of how much I've used up, and so far this is everything that I have used up, and this is what I have left, and I have to make sure that this decimal gets there. So I know that 4 times 2 is 8, right? So this fact right here, 4 times 2 is 8. So if I have 8 thousandths, that's 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. So that would be times 2 thousandths. So 4 groups of 2 thousandths would be 8 thousandths. So I'm putting into each group that other 2 thousandths. So in each group I have the exact same amount, and I have a total of, in each group, 2 plus 6 hundredths, 2 tenths plus 6 hundredths plus 2 thousandths, or this number, 2 and 262 thousandths. That's how much is in each one of these groups here. So I have 4 groups of that. Okay, so this is my big 7. Everything that I would be doing for my big 7 strategy. And then if I have 4 groups, this is how much would be in each group. So then this part right here is my answer.